Alright, you guys, the first part of any exercise program is to do a simple assessment. The purpose of an assessment is you have to know the limitations that you have. We're going to focus on limitations in the mobility of your joints. If you don't know what those are, you're not going to be able to advance through a program because you're going to have too many limitations. And we're going to go over corrections for some of those mobility limitations. We're going to start with the ankle. We're going to move to the knees, hips, and we'll address the shoulders too. So the first part, if you don't have this on your phone, that's fine. You can kind of eyeball it, but in almost any phone, if you go to your compass and you swipe left, it gives you a balance. A lot of people don't realize they have that, but it's there and it's nice. So we're going to check the mobility in my ankles. You align it with your shin. You're going to go forward as far as you can without that heel coming off the ground. Now on my left, I'm about 47 degrees. In my right, about 44. It's only a few degrees difference, not a big deal. The most important thing we're looking for is asymmetry, and there is some asymmetry there, but at least it's not huge. The other thing we're looking for is if you're not at least getting to 40 degrees too, you probably have some extreme mobility issues, whether it be an old injury or something. We need to address that because it's going to limit your range of motion on a lot of exercises. Now, assuming you do have some asymmetry or limitations in your ankle mobility, there's a few things you can do to address that. You want to do some soft tissue work. You can use one of these rollers, or if you even have a rolling pin at home that you use in your kitchen, that works great too. Just use what you have to work with. I'm just going to soften those up on both sides. That's one option. The other option is to use a foam roller, which if you don't have one of these, you need to get one. They can be used for tons of stuff, not just corrective work, and they're very cheap. But same thing as the rolling pin. Just kind of massage the calf with it. Your calf is a very broad muscle, so you want to cover the whole thing. You might not loosen it up the first time, but you definitely want to work on it. If you don't have any issues with the calf at all, you won't feel a thing. You'll just feel a little pressure, but most people have knots or some tightness. The other thing you can do too, especially once you've done that to soften it up, there's different ways to stretch your calf. You can do it kneeling and come forward and really just work on that. Or you can do it standing. And if you do it standing, there's two different things I want you to do, because you have two different calf muscles. Your gastrocnemius is the longer one on top that you actually see when you flex. That attaches above the knee. In a straight leg calf raise, so watch my one in back, that's stretching the gastroc because the knee is straight. If I want to get the soleus, which is the shorter, fatter one underneath, and it actually attaches below the knee, you got to put a bend in the knee when you come forward. So it's a little bit different. I would recommend stretching both those. That's the calf. The next one is knee. We're not really going to focus on mobility as much as range of motion. And the only reason I say that is, and let me grab a bench, you might be limited on certain exercises you can do, or at least the range of motion you can handle, because the one thing you don't want is we don't want knee pain in any of this. So if you're trying to do a fairly deep squat where your hips are even below the knees and coming down to this low bothers you, we don't need that. So, and there's different heights benches you can use, but it's just a matter of knowledge. Now, when you do any sort of squat or lunge, if there's any knee pain whatsoever, it could just be something simple, just like with the calf or with the ankle. It could be just soft tissue. So we're going to work on some soft tissue manipulation with that as well. And there are 4 muscle groups I want you to focus on: quads, hamstring, outer thigh, IT band, and inner thigh. And how you foam roll those are, if I start with my IT band, you're just going to get on it sideways. You're going to roll from your knee up to your hip. If it doesn't bother you at all, there's probably not an issue there. You can move on. If there's tightness, I want you to keep rolling it until it softens up. Then you can roll onto your stomach, get your quad. Like the calf, a quad is a very broad muscle. There's a bunch of muscle groups involved. So I want you to get the whole thing. You're going to have to change your angles a little bit. But I want you to go all the way from the top of your knee to up where your hip bends and the hip flexors. Because a lot of times that's where the problem is anyways. And we'll get your hamstring. Roll that out, get some blood flow going. And then we're going to get the inner thigh next. That's the most awkward one. It's not bad. But you have to go face down. And you're going to roll from the inside of your knee all the way up into the groin. That's why I say it's awkward. And man, do I have some problems there. This is a good one for me. But everybody's different. That'll help with the knee issues. If you ever had an injury and it's something more serious, you're just going to have to limit your range of motion, and that's okay. Just know your limitations. The third one, hip mobility. We'll look at two things on this. We're going to check your range of motion based on hip flexor strength. You're going to come all the way up. If you can't come up at least to 90 degrees from the floor, you probably have limitations there, and I do. You're going to check both legs. All right. Second thing we're going to look for is we're going to see if you have any good glute activation. The reason we need to address this, it's probably one of those important things to look at these days. Most people are sedentary. When you are sitting, your glutes are stretched out for that whole duration you're sitting on your butt. So most people, when they want to work them, they don't activate. It's a neurological thing. They're completely stretched out. So how you want to check that is get into this position, bridge up. If you don't have rock hard butt when you squeeze up like that, you do not get good glute activation, and we need to teach you how to activate those. Otherwise, any sort of squat, lunge, leg press, or any big movement you do, you're not getting out of it what you need to, and it's going to create problems. You're going to have a lot of quad dominance, and that will cause some problems later. So, to work on that, if you have a hip flexor issue like I do, there's a couple things you can do. Bent knee, push against it. You're not going hard. Remember, this might be a neurological thing, and if there is a neurological issue and it's not just muscle, you can't go intense with these. If you're pushing too hard, you're going to have overcompensation the way you always have. You need to go light. I'm only giving like 10 or 15%. And you're going to do that for like 5 to 7 seconds each time. And I want you to do it multiple times. For the sake of the video, I'm just going to do it a couple, but we need to work on that. Once that becomes kind of easier and you think you have a little bit more strength, you can even try and do single leg and straight. It takes a little bit more force. Let's start with the first one. Glute activation. If you're not getting the glute activation, there are a couple things you can do. One, you can do, actually the first one would just be the bridge that we did. We need to really work on that. One thing you can do with that is if you turn your feet and your knees out a little bit, it'll activate your medial glute, which is more likely to fire than the main glute in the back. So turn your knees and feet out a little, do that. Get those firing first, and then go straight. Keep your feet and knees straight, really work on that. Once you get that, more intense version is a single leg bridge. And put your calf on the foam roller, tuck this knee up, and bridge up that way. And work on glute activation that way. That's going to get it much stronger. As we go through our exercises, there will be some power band bridges that we do. That'll get you going even more. But this is initial stuff before you even start your exercise program. This is just part of your assessment. All right? So that's ankles, knees, hips. Now we'll address the shoulder a little bit. My shoulder range of motion is awful. I'm not even going to try and hide it because I couldn't fake it. But what you do is you make fists and you bring them behind your back. Unless you are practically grabbing your hands from behind, and you can see that I'm not, you've got limited range of motion there. If they're symmetrical at least and pretty close, It's not necessarily something that's going to lead to injury, because asymmetry is the biggest indicator that injury is going to happen. But we want to work on increasing that range of motion at least a little bit. So there's a few things I want you to do for that. We are going to foam roll the thoracic spine. Now I want you to get on this thing. Start about mid-back. You don't want to necessarily roll onto the lower back where it curves in. Start on the mid part of your back that still curves out. Hands locked behind the head and elbows forward. I want you to do a back bend, and I want you to stay here for 3 or 4 really deep belly breaths. No chest breathing. We want belly breaths. That's going to help activate your central nervous system and tell your body to do what you're trying to get it to do. There's big science behind this. It's a belly breath. You may even feel your back pop during this. Mine usually does. Once you've done that spot, we're going to hit a couple other spots too. Roll up a couple vertebrae. Same thing. 3 belly breaths. And then go up a little bit more up by your shoulder blades, just below your neck. That's one thing to foam roll. Next one, get your lat. Get right up in your armpit. Try different angles. See if there's any tightness or pain. Roll a little further down on the meaty part of the lat. Same thing. And I'm rushing through this for the sake of teaching, but feel free to spend a couple minutes doing this. The more you do, the more benefit you're going to get from it. All right? That's one thing. Next couple things we can do. First one will be a stretch for the top side. And you can even use a simple towel for this if you want. You don't have to have a fancy strap. But use your bottom hand to pull this arm back and put a good stretch on that tricep. Could just be that you have some tight muscle groups, is why the top hand won't reach back. Do that with both arms. As far as the bottom one goes, we have found the best way to increase range of motion isn't through necessarily stretching, because you're actually straining the muscle when you do that, but through muscle activation. So we're going to use that for the bottom end. So you're going to step on a band. You don't want something rigid like a strap for this. You need a flexible band. You're going to grab it, force it up with your other hand, because you want to be able to go further than you were able to, and then let go and hold it. Right now the muscles in my back are holding this in place. You're going to hold that for 5 to 7 seconds. Come down. Do it several more times. Over time you're going to realize your range of motion is increasing on this. I've seen people, including myself, that had problems even getting their hand back there to easily coming up midway up their back after a while. So that's the simple assessment and the corrections that go with it. This is very important that you learn this stuff, that you do a quick assessment on yourself. You don't have to know any science behind it, but you need to know what your limitations are so you don't end up in injury. Focus on those joint mobilities and always do the correctives before you start your workout. All right?